Here we go. Live.
Welcome to the weekly webinar that we have going. I'm here, Josh Wander, speaking from the city of our grandparents, our mamas and our papas here in Hebron. This week's parsha, I'm sure, as the rabbi will mention, is Parshat Chai Sarah, and it has to do with Avraham Avinu purchasing this plot so many thousands of years ago for a burial place for his wife Sarah. And I'm honored to be here tonight representing the Jewish people here in Hebron. And with that, I'm going to let Rabbi Winston and Yehud.
Hi, I'm Yehuda Shamroth, speaking to you from Ramat Beit Shemesh. I was here just as a backup to introduce Rabbi Winston from Telstone in case Josh froze like he's doing now. So without further ado, I'll just say one thing, that we are sponsored by bringthemhome.org, which is a beautiful website if you want to learn about Aliyah, and also Israel 365. Rabbi Pinchas Winston has his own fantastic website that you should really visit right away after the broadcast. And it's called 36.org. 36.org. You can see at the screen. So please, without further ado, everybody knows Rabbi Pinchas Winston from Telstone and Beishat Torah and other wonderful things. Please see the website and listen to his wonderful shiur right now.
And you should buy lots of books. Everyone should buy 100 books each, preferably. Okay, this is a very important parsha. They're all important. Everyone is important in its own right. Last week was the Akedah, which we spoke about, and each one has its own lesson to teach. But in some respects, this parsha is kind of undersold, meaning it's obviously important, as Josh pointed out. He's standing in the place that we purchased in this week's parsha, going back 3,000. I don't even know exactly how many years, but absolutely remarkable thing to be able to stand there after all this history, because we have been expelled from this land several times. They've tried to grab it from us. It's been, a tug of war for the longest time. And here, to be able to stand there, and at the time that we're reading the parsha where the whole episode with Ephron took place, and Avram purchasing the cave and the field and all that, and that we have our avos are buried there. It's a very, 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 very significant, extremely emotionally meaningful thing. I can't really emphasize that enough, as much as I'm trying, but there are 3,800. Thank you. There you go, right there, 3,800. So the one of the most important lessons, like a lot of these lessons from the Torah itself, comes from something that people don't really focus on, and that's often the case. Is the most obvious lessons that we learn from the Torah and the stories and all that, but sometimes the most important lessons can be learned out from things that just brush right over. We spoke about how Noach matzeh chei b'nei Hashem, that Noach found grace, translated, in the eyes of God, a very short verse at the end of Parshas Bereshis, and we read it and move on. And that's the reason why God didn't drown Noach together with everybody else, because he found this thing called ched. And we've spoken about how that is everything. It's like someone says to you, by the way, if you want to survive the financials, if the stock market ever crashes, you want to survive it, you should take a look at the following book and you move on. Wait a second. And, especially if you're going through a financial crisis at that point in time, it's like, this is crucial information how to survive divine judgment at a time that's very, very strong and very strict. And Noach is able to do that. And each parsha has that hidden message that you have to dig up and go into and think about, because God gave us a brain. He gave us a brain, and he expects us to use it, to think, and not to take things for granted. It's so easy to do that. And if we do that, we miss the most important messages about life that are designed to help us enhance our own personal lives and to get more out of our potential. So, having said that, just catch up where we're holding at the beginning of this week's parsha. Sarah Imena has died, and she's died because of the Akedah. The Medrash tells us. We don't know that from the Chumash itself. We just know that the Akedah took place at the end of last week's parsha, and then Sarah dies in this week's parsha. We don't even really hear about her death at all. We just know that Avram has come to bury her. That's how we know, and he comes to mourn her. And but the Medrash, which is a story behind the story, fills in the gap and tells us that it was because of the Akedah that she died, meaning that she was able to see, even though she was very far away, and everything about the forefathers, speak about this next week, God willing, was very miraculous. And there's a whole medrash, as to how she was able to see that Avraham was about to slaughter Yitzchak. And some say that she died because she thought he was going to do it, not because she wanted to hold back, but because it was after waiting this long time to finally have a child with Avraham, and who's going to be the spiritual heir of their dynasty, the spiritual dynasty, and he's going to be killed before he even has a chance to get married and have children, was a big shocker. Others say it's because she thought Avraham could not go through with it, and that killed her in the end. Nonetheless, it's a very, very difficult thing to think that God would test Avraham and he would, in fact, allow Sarah to die because of that whole episode. Here's Avraham finally. Just imagine the anguish, or at least the potential anguish that most people would feel. You're celebrating the fact that I passed the test. God told me to bring up my only son, from Sarah as a sacrifice, and now he has, and I did that. I did exactly as I was allowed to do, right, or exactly as I was told to do. And therefore, I didn't hold back, and therefore, I go home knowing that I did not fail this test. I would feel terrible if I failed this ultimate test that God actually himself begged me, so to speak, to do right. And I got it right. And on top of that, I got to eat my cake too, because not only did I pass the test, but I'm able to allow Yitzchak to live too. So I got the whole thing right. And God has blessed me with a son. He goes home to tell Sarah, guess what? I was told to take, him as a test, as a keda, and I did that, and I was able to bring him back down again because God said, I only told you to bring him up as a sacrifice, not to actually sacrifice him as a sacrifice, and therefore we get to keep our son and build a family, etc. Sarah, where are you? Where are you? I don't, looking around, and she's died. I mean, just, from way up to way down. And the counted as one of the tests of Abraham, that he had to deal with this reality and not question it. But nonetheless, that was the way she died, and now he's forced to go mourn her, and rubbing salt in the wound, literally rubbing salt in the wound. He has to buy the land that belongs to him in the future because God has promised it to him, and not just buy it, but buy it from a crooked salesman. He's got to go buy it from Ephron, who, as the Gemara points out, and Rashi brings down in this week's parsha, he says a lot but does very little. He makes it seem like, what's a piece of land between friends? And Avram insists upon buying it, and then he buys it at top dollar in the end. It's like, God is there the entire time. He runs the whole show and can make Ephron anybody he wants him to be, and and he can make this deal. It just could work out so nicely, so pleasantly, just the way we want it. I need things to be a certain way because I like comfort. I like to be comfortable. I don't mind, having to put myself out on behalf of my family, certainly on behalf of God, but in my own terms. I don't like what's imposed upon me. I don't like when things don't work out the way I don't enjoy, and it makes my life more distracting, more difficult. And I assume that God wants the same thing, obviously, because we're on the same team. I believe in him, hopefully he believes in me. I believe in his Torah, and his Torah hopefully believes in me. And we're both trying to, bring this world to perfection and accomplish all the great things we're supposed to be here for. So therefore, if I want this, it must be that God wants it too. Well, unfortunately, we see historically that's not the way it works out. And things often go south, as they say. And there's a very important message in that. And the Pri Tzaddik, who's a Reb Tzadok Cohen who lived at the turn of the last century, I believe, wrote a very important work called the Pri Tzaddik. It's on the Chumash itself, but he also speaks about the holidays. And in the holiday of Chanukah, he addresses this very issue how the Ner Chanukah, the Chanukah candles, which we'll delve into a little bit as we get closer to Chanukah, they indicate this message. Which message are we talking about? So after Avraham does that, after he's able to finally buy Mar Machpelah, the cave, and bury his beloved Sarah and Mena there, the first one, it's not the first one of the Avos, because apparently there's a door to Gan Eden, to the Garden of Eden, through that particular cave or burial place. And in Kabbalah, it's even more special than that. It's like almost a portal to a different reality. And that's the reason why Abraham wanted to purchase it, because he realized this is not just any burial place, and not just because it's near Israel, but even more special than that. And it's hugely important to be buried there, to be able to pass on to the next realm very peacefully. Obviously, anywhere in Israel is a tremendous merit to be buried here, and even more so to live here and then be buried here. But this is a small point that again, one of these small points are really big points. And how did he come to find this cave, and it was so important? So again, the Medrash explains that after he did bris milah and then the parshas Lech Lecha, the third parsha, and he was convalescing, and God knew, but he allowed him to go through the motions of experiencing this lack in his life. He saw that Avraham would prefer to have the guests in pain than to convalesce without the guests. So therefore God sent the three angels to be his guests, because he wanted it. Had he not wanted it, then he wouldn't have had the three angels come as guests. But had he not had the three angels come as guests, he wouldn't have gone after a little lamb to sacrifice, to shecht, to serve them meat. And had he not gone looking for that, it wouldn't have run away, and he wouldn't have chased after it, and it wouldn't have brought him to this Maram Pella over here, where he went into the cave looking for this little lamb, wondering, where has it gone? And he looks inside and he sees an opening, and he sees what seems to be, the burial place of Adam and Chava, the first man and woman. And he says at that moment in time, this is where I want to be buried. That's why he's so insistent upon actually buying this place. He wants to own this place. But again, it's because of the fact he wanted to serve these guests. And maybe God would have showed him another time, another way, but that's the way it happened. So you never know. You never know when you do something and you put yourself out, what it might lead to, what it might bring, to you as a result, as a merit, as a reward for having wanted this special thing. So here this cave is tied to this chesed that Abraham had to do, because, as the rabbis point out, hospitality, we call haknasas orchim, bringing in guests and taking care of them, which unfortunately, because of the coronavirus, has become very difficult, if not impossible to do. That it's similar, or it's actually as if you are welcoming the divine presence into your home. And Abraham loved that. That's what he wanted to do. And the reward for that was he got to have this cave in the end, which he buys in this week's parsha. Fine. And he does that, and he mourns Sarah. Now, part of this discussion has to do with the word livchosa. It says he came to mourn her, to cry for her. That's where he the beginning of the parsha. And if you look in the Sefer Torah, and maybe in the Chumash too, some Chumashim do it this way too, you look, the word livchosa has the letter chaf inside of it, but the chaf is small. It's smaller. It's written smaller than the rest of the other letters in the word. And yet that usually means something to Sefer Torah. It's not because they ran out of space, not because the scribe was trying to save some ink, right? Because that's the tradition. And he writes it small, just like the Aleph and Vayikra, and Sefer Vayikra is also small, and the whole Torah of thought comes out of that little Aleph, very Kabbalistic. And likewise this Chuf, although it's not clear why the Chuf itself specifically indicates what? It indicates that Avraham mourned and cried for Sarah, but not too much. He limited how much he cried, enough that it was appropriate to show his love and his respect, and he missed her, but not to the extent where it seemed to indicate that he had no idea why it happened, or that things were out of control, that maybe God didn't want this, that it was bad divine providence. He didn't want to give that message. He wanted to show that he accepted what happened, especially given how it did happen in the end, and he was okay with it. He was moving on to the next thing. Doesn't mean he was insensitive. He was totally sensitive. Avram was Mr. Sensitivity. But he wanted to keep things in perspective as well. And there are halachas like this, and halachas of mourning about how much and how far, because we don't want to give the world the wrong idea that we have resentment towards God for what happens, as if he's not in control, as if it's not the right thing to do. So this chaf is small because of that. And we'll come back to that because it's very important. It's even tied to Hanukkah in the end. But that's what this little chaf represents. But this whole discussion is because of a verse I have not yet mentioned that comes after this this whole episode. And the verse says that Avraham was old and he'd come in years, so to speak, and and God blessed him b'kol, which means with everything. God blessed him with everything. Now, okay, good. That's nice to know. But really, I mean, at this point, I mean, at the end of his life, he's not dead yet. He's not going to die yet. There's still time to go. Yitzchak still has to get married, right? And he may die. He's going to die. The Kedah took place at the age of 137, and he's going to live until 175. So he's still got quite a few years left to go. And and at the end of his life, that's when you expected to say that he got old and it was time to die, and God blessed him with everything. By that point, but let's take a look. let's take stock of the situation as it is right now. That he just lost his wife, so he's in mourning still. Okay, at least for a year, at least for a period of time, he has not remarried yet. That's going to come at the end of the parsha when he takes back Keturah, who is really Hagar, who was sent away and is going to be brought back, and he's going to remarry her again, and have a wife, and then he'll have someone to spend the rest of his life with, and on top of that, he has to now play father and mother to Yitzchak, not just father but mother too. He's going to send Eliezer out looking for a shidduch, and everyone knows that's always a real complicated process, and there's all the concerns and the worries, and it goes on. This one didn't work out, and especially in those days, because a lot of people, at least today, it's more mesudar, more organized, with shidduchim, shidchanim, and all that. But in those days, you're sending him out to what are you going to find? There's like very limited stock, so to speak, because most of the people out there are still worshiping idols. So he's got to worry about that he's going to find and even Eliezer says, what if she won't come back with me? And he says, well, don't take my son and bring him to this. It's a problem. There's what to be concerned about, aside from the cost of the wedding, right? And all the gifts, that have to be given. And he does. He sends all these gifts anyhow, et cetera, et cetera. So what do you mean he blessed him with everything? The call with everything. At this point in time, it doesn't look like he has everything. On the contrary, he lost his wife. It looks like there's a bunch of things missing. Now, in the end, when it's all been fixed up, everything's the way it's supposed to be, and he's ready to move on to the next world. So then you can say, but at this stage of the game, it seems a little premature to actually say that he had everything at this moment in time. Almost seems insensitive. That's point number one. Point number two is we see a different episode, but it's part of the same question, and that is later on. Everybody knows the story of Yitzchak and Rivka and Yaakov and Esav and the blessings. That Rivka is going to tell her son Yaakov to dress up as Esav and go before their father and deceive her husband, his father, and say that he's Esav and masquerade as Esav and take the blessings that Yitzchak apparently had intended to give to Esav instead. And the whole thing's going to become revealed after Esav comes back, and it's clear that Yaakov got the blessings. That type of situation doesn't usually bode very well for a marriage. I mean, it's very possible that chas v'chalila, the trust, every relationship, but particularly marriage, is built upon trust. That you would never deceive me, in such a way. And how do you survive that one? How does a marriage survive what Rivka did to Yitzchak? Literally pulled the wool over his eyes in this episode, and Yaakov too, his accomplice. So how do you survive that? Why would you talk about that with me? Why do you think to go behind my back and then make a fool of me and the whole thing like that? And I don't know if I can trust you again. You say it's a one-time thing, but maybe you'll do it again in the future because you feel I won't cooperate and go along with your idea, what you think should happen. A lot of marriages might not survive that, but not theirs. It's like literally Yitzchak is completely okay with it The only thing he's concerned about is maybe he made a mistake by giving the bracha to Yaakov, but once he finds out that he took the right of the firstborn too, and then it worked out the way it's supposed to work out, then so now the only one left that is Esav. He hasn't accepted that. But Yitzchak and Rivka, they're perfectly okay. How did their marriage survive what took place there? And how could they do it in the first place? So this whole series of parshas is about nisyonos, about tests. Right? Avram's 10 tests. That's from Lech Lecha. There's actually 2 tests before Lech Lecha. We don't know about them because they're in the Medrash. But we see the bunch of them come up in the last 2 parshas, all about Avram's tests. When Avram's tests are over, almost his story is over, and then the baton gets passed over to Yitzchak, and it becomes his story, his life in the end. But it's all about tests. What's a test? A test is a difficult situation, a difficult spiritual situation. Physical could also be difficult too, but it might not require much physical exertion, but it's a difficult spiritual test. You have to make a decision that's hard to make because of the consequences. Now, things don't go right in life a lot. I mean, history for sure. The Jewish people have suffered pogrom after pogrom after pogrom, and of course, the biggest of all of them, and the most destructive of all of them, was the Holocaust. And hopefully, we'll never see anything like that ever again. But that was part of our history. And in our own personal lives, how many people suffer financial disaster or financial difficulty or physical difficulties, physical illnesses, and family problems? I mean, it's not as they say, a halak world out there. It's not so smooth. There's a lot of obstacles and things along our way, and they just don't work out. We like it to work out. We plan things to work out. We pray to God that they should work out, but it doesn't work out that way. I mean, right now, people are making weddings during the coronavirus, and they were, boys and girls lived for years. When my wedding comes along, I'm going to have 500 guests and do it over here. And instead, people are having 50 guests right now. That they stand apart and wear these masks, and it's not what we planned. It's not the exciting wedding that we wanted, or a bris, or anything, or the simchas, and how many people have been lost over the last couple of years, just the last year alone, because of coronavirus. That was unplanned and very difficult. And people all of a sudden were happily married, the age of 65, and they lost a spouse, even in their 50s, and all of a sudden, before they know it, they're single once again. Lots of things don't work out. But, is it God punishing me? Why is this bad thing happen? Why do bad things happen to good people? Decent people? Okay, I'm not the best person, I'm not tzaddik, I'm not righteous, but I certainly try. I don't think this person over there or that person over there does any better. On the contrary, if anything, they probably do worse. It didn't happen to them, but happened to me. Is God punishing me? Maybe, but how can you possibly? Did you do something wrong? Did you do something wrong? You did wrong, and that you're waiting for the shoe to drop and God to punish you, and therefore this is that punishment? Or did you think you're doing okay? You can always improve, 100%. But is this a punishment, or is this a nesoya, a test to show me what I'm capable of achieving? Not that God's saying that you just think a lot of stuff wrong, and I'm going to fix it up right now. That may be part of it. Certainly, but that's to our benefit. Or is God saying, something, I'm going to bring you to the next level. I'm going to try to allow you to rise above the everyday, simple, mundane reality. Or is it even more than that? That's for sure part of every test. Or is it more than that? What's the more? Well, we spoke about way back at the beginning. We mentioned it. That really history is about one of two things. It's really about one thing, but that one thing has a second side to it. You can't have redemption if there's no exile. You can't have light if there's no darkness. You certainly can't appreciate one with the other. You need the opposites. That's what's brought down. And simple idea, but even Kabbalah talks about it. So you have redemption. Redemption is that ideal, perfect state. The Garden of Eden was redemption. Not complete, but it was redemption. Meaning what? It was a perfect world. And people talked to God. Well, at least 2 of them, lived at that time. More would have later on when they were born and the world had gone the way it's supposed to go, and Shabbos would have come along and no sin. So then we would have all been born in the Garden of Eden. We all have prophecy and talk to God with the most normal thing in the world. And, the food would be available, no need to work for it. That ideal utopian reality that mankind dreams about in different versions, different forms, and that's redemption. That's like a redemption reality. And eventually when Mashiach comes and all the wars are over, the prophets say, we'll take our weapons and turn them to plowshares, and you won't even need them because anyhow the Gemara says that food will grow. You throw a seed and the whole field will grow with wheat and will blow on its own and become food. Even cakes will grow on trees, and food, cakes, clothing, say cakes, clothing, things like that will just become like a perfect reality. That's redemption. Right? That's redemption. I don't have to work so hard anymore. Ultimately, I'll just be able to focus on what I really want to do, which is basically follow my soul. Right now, it might be hard to do because the world doesn't promote that. The world promotes physicality. So our soul is squashed and stifled inside of ourselves. But the people who are in touch with their soul know that the greatest pleasure we have is connecting with God. Hard sell, right? But it's real. And if you can tap into it, you'd be surprised and amazed. Even the most materialistic person, if they would be exposed to God, if God would talk to such a person, it's hard to talk to them because they're not on the same wavelength. But if they were in the same wavelength, if that person for one moment would have a taste of prophecy and what it means to be connected to the Almighty, the ultimate reality of realities, that person would drop everything they're doing physically and pursue spirituality. That's redemption. That's the ultimate state of mankind. They're all dreaming about, can't wait to get there. And if we lose track and we don't get that, that's called exile. It's like the one long continuum, exile at one end and redemption at the other. And we're always fluctuating back and forth between the two ends, nationally and even personally, because different people can be at different stages of personal redemption. There's a thing called personal redemption that we're all working on. And if enough personal redemptions take place, and national redemption will follow as well. Most people are waiting for national redemption, for personal redemption. As you see, the Jewish people in the desert, they achieved national redemption, but personal redemption was hard to come by. And as a result of that, most of them died in the desert because they just couldn't get it. They couldn't just work it out, even though they had national redemption. So it's either one or the other. Now, one of the many things that made the forefathers unique from the rest of mankind in their time, and us as well, is that they not only knew this idea of redemption or exile, they lived it. They were devoted to it. That was their whole reality, every fiber in their body. And I like to believe that I'm a redemption-oriented person, but I get distracted during the course of the day, and I make decisions that don't really, seem to be consistent all the time with an idea of redemption, because I'm still very much involved in this world, but not them. It was so real to them that they only thought in those terms. How can we participate as individuals in the master plan for creation to work with God to bring the final redemption and free this world once and for all, and bring it to that ultimate level that God intended when he made this place in the first place? That was their whole reality. And they understood that meant cost. It's not a freebie. It's not a free thing. You have to pay stuff. If I want a sweater and I'm not going to knit one myself, and I don't manufacture them myself, I've got to buy them from a store. I walk into a store and I say, I'd like that sweater. Good. Can I have it? No. I can't. Why not? You have to pay for it. You pay for it, you can have it. I know that. It's like it's stealing otherwise. So I come in with my money, my wallet, my charge card, and I buy the sweater. There's costs. I want food, I have to pay. I want to go to a restaurant? I don't walk and go, wow, I just paid money for food. Of course you did. You went to a restaurant. If you go to a store, you pay money for food. It's accepted. We understand that in this world, you have to pay for things. The only question is going to be at what cost? How much am I prepared to pay for this thing? If I paid more than I think it's worth, then I feel like I've been ripped off. I've been cheated somehow. If I pay less, I feel like I got a great bargain. But pay, I got to pay. Can't be, someone wants to give to me for free. Okay, that's a gift. But in general, you have to pay for things. Redemption is no different. You have to pay for it too. How do you pay for it? Well, sometimes with money, but most of the time with self-sacrifice. You have to give up things along the way. You have to put yourself into it. But if it's what you want, I mean, people want to become doctors. They put themselves into college, and they even work themselves through sometimes, jobs and whatever, to graduate. They got to pay a price to get in, and each year after that, and for whatever else they have to buy along the way, it's a cost. And even after they graduate, there are costs involved. To open up an office, you got to pay. We understand the things in life that we value the most, we have to pay. A relationship, you have to pay. You have to give up time. You have to give up money. You have to give a lot of things for the sake of a relationship. The difference is, though, if it's what you want, if it fits into your worldview, if it's your goal, your personal goal to have this thing in life, then you have no problem making the payments. You feel it. You look at your wallet, you say, wow, there was a lot more money when I began this day, and now it's almost empty. But we went, to do something meaningful as a family, and that's what I wanted to do. And because I did that, with a good time, and the family's closer, we'll remember this, it is bonding time, etc. But it cost my pay. And that's the way it works in life. You have to make payments. And Avraham understood that everything that God was doing along the way, every aspect of it, the parts that he understood and the parts he didn't understand, the parts that made sense and the parts that didn't make sense, and the people that were nice and the people that were not nice along the way. I contend with Lot, his nephew. He saves his life, takes him along. They go to Egypt, they get rich, comes back, and Lot says, okay, we can't live together. I'm going to Sodom. Okay, bad enough. That's my own nephew. I'm trying to bring the whole world to God, and my own nephew goes off the derech and goes to Sodom instead, the place that's so anti-God. Okay, that's bad enough and embarrassing enough, But on top of that, now I have to go save him because there's a war, right? And he's been captured, and I have to go save him. Told you so. Just leave him there. Forget it. You sleep in the bed you make. He chose Sodom. Now he paid the price. Nope, gotta go get him. Does Avram complain? Not at all. Weird stuff. Takes in his life. His wife, whom he loves so dearly, can't have children. She's physically incapable. And by the way, the Talmud says that he also is physically incapable of having children. God's making the whole world with people who can have children, people who don't even care about their kids that much or sacrifice them to God. And we who want to bring up somebody to walk in the ways of God can't even have children. Physically. You made us. It wasn't a random thing. You did that. And then on top of that, I have a child through Hagar, is Ishmael, is going to become a murderer, thief, weird stuff, difficult stuff all along the way. Does everyone complain? No. It's an assignment. It's a test. It's more than a test. It's a cost. I don't understand why God does this. I thought we're in the same team. I thought I understood what he wants, but apparently I don't, because I wouldn't have chosen that, and I wouldn't have chosen that. It was Sarah, because she couldn't have children, who told me to take her concubine or her help, her what do we call it, her person who was helping her out, and to make my concubine to have children through her. That was her suggestion. It was all divine providence that worked it all out. And then the Keda, etc., etc. So the reason why Abraham has everything, because Abraham is so focused on the goal. He's so tied in to what God wants. He's so, you understand? Listen, I'll see Sarah later on in Gan Eden. She's gone to Gan Eden, as they say. She's gone to a better place. She's going to be rewarded for her righteousness. The Torah tells us how righteous she was right at the beginning by breaking down her age and the different groups of age and what they mean. Rashi explains them. She's going to get everything coming to her and more. So I'm happy for that. I'll miss her. You can't believe how much I'll miss her. We're like one in the end. But she's a cost. For some reason, for the sake of the redemption of the Jewish people, which might not even take place for thousands of years down the road. I don't even know yet. But this is a cost that the Jewish people, for whatever reason, I don't understand. I just want to know one thing. Avram says, did I do my part? Am I responding the right way? Am I sanctifying the name of God? The Pri Tzaddik points out a remarkable idea. In the Chumash, right, we see in Parshas Vayeshev that the brothers, 10 of them, take Yosef because they feel he's a danger to the future of the Jewish people. They kidnap him and sell him into slavery, even though the Torah is going to forbid that completely later in the future and be capital punishment for things like that, but they do it anyhow. They sell him into slavery. And then Yaakov mourns the loss of his beloved Yosef, and he can't be consoled. The entire time he can't be consoled. And then the brothers are starting to figure, well, maybe that was a mistake. Maybe we shouldn't have done that. Maybe we understated the problem in terms of our father and overstated the problem in terms of Yosef. And maybe we shouldn't have followed Yehuda. You're the leader, right? You're the king. You're the one who tells us what to do. You told us to sell him. We sold him. If you said don't sell him, we wouldn't have sold him. You know something? Because of you, this whole thing has gone. There's a disaster. So you know what? We're going to demote you. We look down on you because of this whole episode. The priest says that it's only because they didn't understand something. They didn't understand what was really going on. I mean, later on, Yosef will say to his brothers, I forgive you. All of you, don't worry, don't panic. Ani Yosef, I'm viceroy. My dreams have come true, but I forgive you. You know why? You wanted to sell me into slavery, but God wanted me to become viceroy to be able to save you later on when there's a famine. So it was all God the entire way through. But it's because of Yehuda. Now the brothers say, oh, you know something? We demoted you, but now we're going to promote you. You know why? Because of you, this whole thing is unfolded the way it's supposed to, in such a glorious way. We didn't see it back then, but now we see how God works and how the whole situation was meant to be. All divine providence. All from the will of God. In fact, the Pri Tzaddik, Tzaddik Cohen, says even one more amazing thing. He says the Greeks came along, Hanukkah time, and they forbade people to learn Torah and to keep Shabbos and bris meal and things like that, and caused a backlash amongst the Jewish people who were acquiescing and doing it in the forest and secretly and private, not fighting back. But God did this to the Jewish people. Why? Because it brought out the good. The negativity, the pressure that was put on the Jewish people because of the Greeks woke up many of them, and they fought back and they sanctified the name of God, when until that time there was more of a profanation of God. It also caused a division in the Jewish people because God likes to reveal who believes what and where they stand. So some people went this way and followed after the Greeks and chose out of the Jewish people, and that's exactly what happened to them. And the other people woke up and said, no, we need to fight back. We need to sanctify the name of God. And that's what they did. So Avraham was a master of this. He felt everything that any other human being is going to feel. And he felt it in an appropriate way. But he never lost sight of the fact that God was behind all of it, everything, and that it was all ultimately for the sake of the redemption of the Jewish people, who's going to eventually exist, but of the whole world too. So if I have to pay with this or pay with that, I got to deal with an Ephron who's literally the lowest of the lows, in the world, and to buy land that belongs to me, or will in the future, to own this place and to be able to bury my beloved Sarah, and not to deal with like Yitzchak having to find a wife and Eliezer, all costs that I have to decide to make for the sake of redemption. And if I can do that, if I'm doing that, if I'm focused, if I'm clear about all of that, I have nothing to complain about. That was Abraham's point of view. And that's what the Torah is telling you when it says that God blessed Abraham b'kol, with everything. Because since he was able to use his life and the opportunity, he was able to focus and see what had to be done and see, to look at the proper light rather than just mourn and be sad. He felt complete. He was on track. And that's also to do with the little chof in the word livchosa. In the Talmud, it's talking about Hanukkah. It's talking about the origin of the holiday of Hanukkah. We know the story. It's right there too. And then it mentions, that you cannot place a menorah higher than 20 amas high. 20 amas, in Hebrew would be a chof. A chof symbolizes the number 20. And the Gemara goes on to explain why you can't. Ein eina sholtabe, because the eye can't see that high up. Now the truth is, there's ways around it. The halacha really should be instead that you can place a menorah as high as you want, as long as it's big enough that people can recognize it as a menorah and why you're lighting it. So why 20 amas high? Okay. That's what the Gemara says, and we leave it. The next section that follows right after, immediately on the heels of that halacha, is that the pit was empty and there was no water inside of it. So the Gemara asked the question, if the pit was empty, I know there's no water inside of it. Why did it tell me that? So the Gemara, the Talmud comes back and says, to tell you that there was no water inside of it, but there were snakes and scorpions. So Yosef is put in this pit by his brothers in Shechem, inside, where there's no water. They don't hear any splashing. No, they're not going to drown them, right? And there's snakes and scorpions down there. Now, why must I know that? Why is it important? Clear. To tell us that Yosef survived in this pit because of a miracle. He should have been bitten to death right away, and he wasn't. So why didn't the brothers notice that? If the brothers had noticed that, then they would have realized that miracles were happening for Yosef, and they would have reevaluated the decision, because does God do miracles for evil people? No. So if miracles happen for Yosef, it must be that God likes him. So let's rethink our decision about what to do with him. But they don't see that. They don't know that. Maybe because it's 20 amas deep. Now, it's different in the ground than certainly above ground, because there's light above ground. In the pit itself, it's quite dark, and the pit might be very wide, and but they just didn't see it. And we'll talk about this more by Chanukah time. I'm going to cheat a little bit and just make the point and not explain it so much. But the chaf, it turns out, represents a certain, not just a physical blindness, but a spiritual blindness. An inability to be able to recognize the hand of God in the events of history, personally, nationally, internationally. The election that just took place in the United States of America, for example. Everyone's distracted by the news. Well, this said that, and they said this, and cheating, and 100%, all that stuff might be true and real. But the bottom line is, God runs the show. Nothing takes place without the permission of God, no matter what it is, no matter how bad it looks, no matter how much the outcome is so contrary to what we would think that God would want, what we would want, certainly, God runs the show. It's real. He all the time. And furthermore, even though it seems to work backwards to what we would think is good for Jewish history, somehow it's working perfectly for the sake of Geula, redemption, Jewish history. That's the Bakol, right? That's the Chuf. That's the whole idea. That's the Chuf in Levchosa, to tell us that Abraham never lost sight of the fact, even though he was jolted out of his reality to Simcha, in the heights, the lowest, to mourn, and and how it happened and why it happened, etc., etc. The whole thing. He never lost sight of the fact it's all from God. It's the hand of God, and if it's the hand of God, by definition, it's going to be right. I'm not good with it. That's me, not God, not the reality, and that's why he had Bakol, because ultimately speaking, without that mentality, that emotional understanding, a person's going to always be disappointed and feel as if they're lacking, as if they're missing something, as if they got cheated and ripped off and offended and etc. And believe me, it's hard. I know it's so hard. Even if you know these ideas, inside the voice is saying, "Yep, it's from God, it's from God, it's from God." But the heart's going, "Yeah, but this person did it. You want Bakol? You want everything? You want to feel that sense of satiation? You have to have that Avraham perspective. Very, very short verse. We go through it very quickly. We finished it before you know it, and yet it teaches the most fundamental lesson about life and history. If we think about it and we integrate it, and we actually go, use as a key to the upcoming parshas and Chanukah and all that, we'll be able to glean a lot of wisdom in the meantime that will certainly enhance our lives tremendously. Have a great rest of your week. Not much left. Tomorrow's already Friday. Therefore, Shabbat Shalom.
Thanks, Rabbi Winston. Thank you again. We're always so honored to have you on and so spellbound by your beautiful shirim. Everybody, please visit israeltorah.org and 36.org. I thought I put that one up. Rabbi Winston's website. It's chock full of all kinds of wonderful Geula information and historical information and how Torah relates to our lives politically and spiritually. All kinds of webinars, seminars, books. Please visit his site. And thanks again, Rabbi, for joining us and taking us out of your home, your personal time. We really appreciate this so very much. And I want to say goodbye to everyone, especially there have been people online tonight from Israel, Canada, the United States, and a special hello to Helena in Helsinki for joining us, which is really wonderful. So everybody, don't forget also to visit Josh Wander's website, bringthemhome.org and Israel 365, and have a wonderful Shabbat, everyone. Wonderful evening. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Good night.